Everyone, welcome back to the Moonlighters Club. Brandon, what's going on?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm all right. I got it all set up. I got the notes on one side. I got my daughter's sleepy cam on one side. Saturday, man. I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I kind of have a similar setup. I have the notes on the side on my laptop, and then I have you on the TV. So at some point, I might be looking at you directly, and then at other times, I might look at the TV to actually be seeing you. So it might look like I'm off camera.
At some point, I gotta get a studio or a place because
Yeah,
if you do anything creative, you're just gonna get a bunch of stuff in your house. Just is what it
right,
is.
right. And then, this is a new platform. I've never seen Riverside before, so I didn't get enough time to kind of look through the interface and see if I could gray out the background or whatever. But I kind of cleaned up as much as I could. But this looks like a good shot, so this is all good. It kind of
Oh
shows
that's definitely, I like it. I think it's look, it just feels like you just always have something going on. I have like 1,000 mics. I got like 1,000
yeah.
pop filters. I got a bunch of cameras, bro. They're just everywhere, man. Like, and I had an office, so my office would look the same. But when we had our daughter, I moved my office to my wife, so now I'm in a basement, and I had to stuff everything into this cabinet over here.
Down in the basement.
So it's like I have a bookshelf, half a cabinet. So my room would look like yours, and I didn't mind it because it was mine.
Right.
And now it's just kind of in a bookshelf somewhere. Just so yeah, I got to get my own space.
Right. Yeah. Like now that you say that, I feel kind of like a silly guy because it's like I got a mic right here. I guess if I put this in the shot, then we can act as if I'm using it, right? Like that's what everybody does on a Instagram podcast. So.
Yeah, man, that's what the folks do. They try to make it look as official as possible. Why don't you introduce yourself in terms of your name, your title, your companies?
So my name, Brandon Head. I also go by Tragic Johnson. And I own the Carlwell Group, which is a video production company. It's kind of like a one-man band slash maybe like network conglomerate with different other small businesses to try to group together different pieces of a visual project, albeit, the visual, the music, the clothing, things of that sort.
Nice, man. Yeah, no, we just like I interviewed Shep Shepsworth Bentley, for those who know or don't, a little bit ago. But yeah, we all met at the Black Genius Art Show, and for the 2-year anniversary. And I saw some of the stuff you did. You got really nice stuff.
Very good time.
Yeah. But you're a Baltimoreite, but you're not from Baltimore, right?
Right. Yeah. So I'm originally from South Carolina, but I've been in Maryland since I was like 13 or 14. So I say I'm from Baltimore by way of South Carolina. But yeah, people kind of are quick to call me out from the accent perspective. So I have to kind of give them some type of explanation. So yeah, there it is.
The crazy thing is the accent is so. But here's the funny thing. We did the showcase in Baltimore. I met Akia was the first person I met in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
Off surface, you generally don't even like hear it. You know what I mean? Like you don't. It's when people get relaxed and you're in a group of folks from the city, that's when you're like, holy shit. Like I don't sound anything like you.
That is often the case. Or if you're like with people that are like born and raised from the city and you're like walking downtown and you're hearing the sounds, or if you walk into a place downtown and like you just hear a bunch of people talking, then it's like super pronounced. It's like, damn, do I sound like that? Because the funny thing is, it's like then when I go out of state, somebody's like, man, you sound like you got a Baltimore accent. I'm like, do I? So I don't know.
I sound I sound as white as possible because everyone's saying Baltimore. Because I'm always like Baltimore, Maryland. Because I can't say, I grew up in Boston, so I can't. First of all, I already don't pronounce things correctly. So like I try to hide it. But like I said, I say Baltimore or like that. I'm just like Baltimore, Maryland. And people are like, bro, who are you?
Nah, you just have a Baltimore accent, man. You don't talk white. Don't say that, man. Don't say that, man.
It's a joke. And when I say white, I mean posh, like the poshiest, rich banker who pronounces every single syllable.
Maybe like Queen's English. I get what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah, you get all the words.
Ain't nothing wrong with a brother talking proper, man. I'll be one to step up for that.
Oh, no,
for sure.
No, not absolutely not, man. Say salutations, all that stuff.
Right. Like you know.
Yeah, man. But so I know you as a creative. You do
Yeah.
videography, man. You're involved in music. How'd you find yourself getting into that?
So I had been doing video stuff as far back as maybe even high school, just kind of playing around with, back in like, shit, I'm dating myself, but back in like 2005, 2006, I always kind of had my hand on some type of like camera or something like that. And I kind of always was playing with like the Windows Media Maker or whatever. So I kind of always had an understanding of like a non-linear interface timeline type of thing. And, I guess when I was looking at going to school for something, because my dad was kind of like, well, you need to, go to school for a degree like this, something in mathematics or something scientific, something else. I kind of figured out a way to like, if I do art, but I do it computer based, then technically it's a computer science degree. So I kind of like, finagled my way into kind of doing that. But it's kind of been something that I've always done, just shooting things. And then I think by virtue of that, I wanted to be able to draw. So I grew up drawing a lot, played a lot of video games, kid of the internet, making, beats and stuff like that. So all of those artistic skills kind of always just came together in a package.
It's crazy, man. When you talk about like college, like I ended up going back and forth to school when I did finish going to school. I majored in entrepreneurship, but most of the classes are business based. There's nothing less creative than business courses. It just is what it is, man. Accounting, like it just is what it is. You do need some kind of like, I don't think that's the best way. Like in terms of just doing business, because it gets so dry, so factual. You have to exercise those muscles all the time. And I generally do find people who find a way to do that later in life. It's like, nah, I want to try something else. I need to get out here and do something that really exercises my creative muscle. So that's how I felt about college. Like it's, yeah, this business stuff is how the world works, but I like doing fun stuff. Like I like creativity. It's what it is.
Well, and I think like I always had kind of my ear to kind of like the entrepreneurial side of it. My stepmother, she was an entrepreneur in the sense that she would, go to locations and sell clothes. So she was like one of those like run up merchants, like in a white van that had like all these like leather, like uh Negro League and Buffalo Soldiers jackets and stuff like that. And she would go to like bowling alley to bowling alley and hustle those things out. And then she would like for the big time like vending shows, she would go to like the magic show in Las Vegas and stuff like that. So growing up around that type of environment, my dad kind of I think wanted something a little bit more direct and cookie cutter, and that was kind of the path I ended up taking. But I knew that if I had a degree, just based off of my situation, and it was in kind of something that I desired, I could always fall back on that and do something entrepreneurial. So
When you left school, what career lane, what kind of work were you doing fresh out?
So when I left school, I happened to be working for the government at the time. I have been working for the government since my 12th grade year in high school. I was in the high school work study program. So I was working on Fort Meade doing work, as a civilian with a full clearance at 15. So I had kept that through college and knew that I was going to always have a job. So I just had a career in the government space and civil service. So that was what I was doing for about 15 years.
Overall, good experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the things I was doing, I was an intelligence officer for a 3-letter agency, and I definitely love the opportunities that it granted me and the things that it taught me, the places that it took me and stuff like that. A lot of good memories, at the end of it all. Just very hard on the mental, and it was time to make a change. So I think that was kind of where having my degree at least gave me a foundation to be able to kind of like step away from that and transition into kind of what I'm doing now more professionally, but also kind of led me to being able to start my business as well. So
How did you get into this current line of work? And what's your title? What do you do?
so in terms of like my personal business,
Let's start
or
your job, your
okay,
employment.
okay, yeah. So currently, I'm working as a video producer for the Black Star Network. The Black Star Network is a Black-owned television company owned by three-time Hall of Fame award journalist Roland Martin. You might have seen him on like CNN like 10 years ago, and he had his own show on Washington Watch back in like the early 2017s or 2010s. And when that discontinued, he decided to open up his own company. So he has a studio down in DC. So I've been working there for about a year now as a video producer.
Got it. What is some of your day to day? What kind of stuff do you do?
So it could be anything from generally editing day to day. And that editing is graphic related, very graphic intensive, or cutting, sounds on tapes or, what's called a voiceover, where it's kind of just like somebody's talking and it's like editing up the video so that it's presented in a presentable way for the news. And then actually operating in the studio when the show actually begins, then I'm kind of like a graphic engineer at that point, where he'll call for the graphics and then stuff comes up. In the event that he's like going out to a event, I'll go for local support, set everything up. So I'm a part of that like break up and set down team, and then film crew. And then if there's a story, sometimes they'll send me out, with gear, and just go capture the story and come back and then edit something, and then we'll put it up. So, yeah,
that's a lot. Now I already know this, but I would love for you to explain a day in the life of Brandon at work. And I mean, from wake up to going home, describe what that is.
Yeah. So I usually get up, I think around 8:30. Usually try to get my mind right, try to eat some breakfast, but I try to get to the train station by 10:30. So all that time in the morning is kind of just prepping my mind, right? Answering emails, just making sure like I got everything ready for the day. Go to the train, take an hour train from Baltimore to DC. So then I'm going on the train from Baltimore to DC. When I get to DC, get to Union Station, then I get to the Metro. And then when I get to the Metro, I take it to Farragut North, right? So going through DC, walking, enjoying my day, get to the studio. First thing I'm doing is looking at my email, trying to see if any requests have already come my way. It's a small team, and my lead producer gets there earlier. So she basically will send me graphics request or video request for me to edit and cut. And essentially that is like going online and doing a template type of situation where I would grab some video, cut it in a certain type of format, and then I just give it some credit of like where it's from, sourced, and then I just package it back up to her. Or a graphic request would be, hey, here's some type of image online. I need you to put this on a background, or I need you to name these people and there's like 20 headshots, or I need you to create these graphics using this text, or it could be any number of things. And this is all preparation for the show. So I'm probably doing that from, 11:30 to about like 1. And then by 1:30, I'm getting a rundown report. And the rundown report basically is going to run down all the shows that we're going to do that day, or stories, I'm sorry, that we're going to cover that day. And that could be anywhere from 5 stories to 15 stories. So then with each story, there's a link associated to it with an article. So I have to read all article. And then once I'm reading all these articles, it's my job to kind of come up with up to 5 to 8 headlines about the article. The headlines got to be less than 80 characters. So it's just like kind of reading the article based off of whatever the flavor of the show is that day, based off of those stories. Sometimes they're interesting stories, sometimes they're not. but they're all related to Black people's benefit in the United States. So I'm just learning a lot. And then once I do that, I ship that back to her. Usually can take like a 30-minute break. Get back. Then all of those things that I created as far as headlines need to be then turned into graphics for lower thirds, so that when we're going to transition to that story during the live show, I can change the story. And that kind of like helps the viewer understand the context of what's being talked about. So like if a person just turns into the news and that lower third is saying Donald Trump just got arrested, like they'll know exactly kind of what is happening in context into relation to what he's talking about. So it kind of is like that type of guide. I also create the ones for the people's names as well. So then, you know, based off of the number of guests, we got to create those. Then about 4:30, 5:30, it's transferring all that data that I've created all day to the actual computers that we're going to be operating on. So I do that for about an hour, and then the show starts at 5:55. We do our countdown, and the countdown is when I kind of go over the rundown that's now been printed out, and that's going to be the permanent show for the night. And then it's up to me to like look at the rundown. If I were doing the video, it'd be the same thing. But essentially, it's just like, okay, this is the story. This is the block that it's in. The block is going to be broken up in every 15-minute intervals, roughly. And it tells you what the story is, what videos are going to be played, how long those videos are, how many graphics are on, then what guests are talking. And I just have to make sure that all of those things are assembled, you know, for the correct story. So they all need to be presented, and I'm working with two computers when I'm doing this. So it's like I have to operate something on this computer, then I have to switch and operate on another computer. And we do that from 6 to 8. Sometimes he goes over and the show can be to 8:30, which then is kind of problematic because I've called you several times and I'm like, hey, I think I missed my train because I've been late, or you know, it'd be something like that. But essentially, I have to get back to Union Station by 9:10. Get to the train station. Sometimes I grab a beer. Sometimes I grab something to eat. Get on the train. Get back to West Baltimore by like 10, and then I get home at 10:15.
That's insane. And second of all, I knew what you did. I knew some of the stuff you did. I didn't know you were like on throughout the show. That's crazy, bro. That's a lot, man. I salute you. That's quite a workload. It's just a lot, bro. Like you say it so casually. Like, you've been doing this for a year?
Yeah.
Would you ever do your own show now that you've seen like what something like that is like?
Yeah, I kind of do one right now. So I shoot an internet show called BMore Human, where we go around in Baltimore to like events. And then we try to do random street interviews, whereas though we're just trying to get across a different light for the people that live in Baltimore, because I think in the national press, we don't get a lot of credit. I think we're talked very poorly about. So I wanted to be able to kind of show people online the different sides of Baltimore, and just kind of approach people with just random daily questions, just to say, hey, we're regular people, just like everybody else. And I think the idea of being more human is like an important concept. So, you know, I think it kind of shares a little bit of good wisdom, and people usually feel good about it. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely would do a show.
Repeat everything you're involved in.
So yeah, I own the Carlwell group, and then I work professionally with the Black Star Network. And then I mentioned that show as something that I create. So I guess that's something. Then I'm also a part of a production team called the Super Baltimore Bros. um, and that's more or less just a duo with me and a friend of mine that does BJR, who does music. He's a music producer, so we'll do visuals together, or like visual compilations together. And then I also am a part of a clothing brand called Canvas Cartel. You might not be able to see the shirt, but Canvas Cartel. That's based in my neighborhood, working with some really good guys over there. Shout out to my guy Don. Dominic, what's up? But yeah, I mean, I'm a part of, I guess, 5 things I would say committed.
So the extracurricular things, your passions, did they all start to happen around the same time? Was Carlwell Group first? You started doing work and meeting folks and doing folks, and then you started taking other things on, or did this stuff just like organically all happen around the same time? Because you are involved in a lot of great things. I'm just curious about the timeline.
So I guess the timeline would be I left the government in like 2019, but I had always been kind of doing video work, so I had kind of already met these people. But me and Don had kind of been working together a little bit, or just got familiar with each other. But we started really kind of locking in once I stopped doing the government stuff. And then at some point working with them, I realized I probably need to get an LLC. So then I started my own company. And as I was looking for work, because, you know, I was living off of my savings at the time and realizing like, you know, I'm going to need some type of full-time income to support my life. That was kind of where I said, yeah, let me do the LLC. Let me try to get official as possible. And, you know, I did that for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And it was difficult in terms of like customer acquisition, I would say. There was a lot more that, you know, from looking back on the experience, it's like there's probably a few things that I would probably try to enhance, but, you know, it worked for what it was, I think, and still is. It's just now it's like, okay, I've done that. I've kind of already hit that kind of stopgap with it. And then as I was looking for work around last year, the Roland Martin opportunity came up. So I'd say roughly that's the timeline. The timeline would be, was doing work, met some really great people, started LLC, and then later like did my business, and then later got a job. That's kind of how I would say the timeline is.
So in terms of Super Baltimore Bro, Carlwell Group, Canvas Cartel, how do you schedule your work? How do you know what you're going to be focusing on? And because I already know your schedule's packed, do you just say, hey, I'm going to do one on Saturday, one on Sunday? Does one take priority all the time? Because I personally struggle with that. I usually have, before like I got to DC, it was like Moonlighters Club and 30 things. Eventually my wife's like, you got to chill with this, bro. So I'm like, all right, I'll do one thing and kind of focus here. But even just knowing where to move next, still an issue.
So I think a lot of it is sometimes when I'm working with like other people, especially like with Super Baltimore Bros, that is something that I would say is kind of almost in a way constantly happening day to day. So, you know, if I have an idea, I'll send it in a group chat to Don and BJ. And we're kind of always discussing and formulating an idea, but like to the point in which we execute something that's usually scheduled and planned. So I think for most things for me, there's just that pre-production or pre-planning phase that needs to happen that doesn't necessarily involve everybody being in person. So I think there's a lot of wiggle room to kind of rack and stack what is a priority and what's not. But if I were to rank it, I would definitely say the Super Baltimore Bros would be just something that's constantly going. The Canvas Cartel is more based on demand, and that's based off of kind of what they kind of have going on with their clothing drops, and then the need for the visual. So that then gets further planned. And then in the same vein, we kind of start talking a little bit more about it. And then there's an execution point. So like a lot of these things are kind of staggered in its own right. And then I guess going tandem every day with the Carlwell group, it's probably the least that gets the most love, I would say, because it's not as if I'm actually going out, pushing out my business cards, talking about the Carlwell group. But when I'm going out to network events such as, you know, Black Genius Art Show, that's when I'm able to kind of focus that at the forefront, and then kind of have Super Baltimore Bros and Campus Cartel be vehicles in which, okay, well, the Carlwell group has been working on these things. So those are vehicles that I can then kind of use and say, hey, but this is the work that I've been doing collectively under the Carlwell Group banner. So it kind of works together in that type of formulation. Doesn't really get to the Carlwell Group stage of things unless people or the client is really like pressing about a need, and then that hat goes on, and then it's a similar process.
Got it. Okay, cool. What do you? I already know you're nice with the camera, bro. I've seen your work, seen the stuff you do. In terms of when you work with your friends, what role do you play outside of creative? Are you creative direction? You lead stuff? How do you fit in? Because there are a lot of folks we've had on this show who solopreneurs, and the toughest thing is when new people come in, or you need more people to come in. Now it's time to manage. Now it's time to play relationships. That's where people have so many bumps. But I feel like you do it pretty well with your friends.
Yeah. So I think when I'm doing the video stuff on my own, I think you did kind of hit it on the head. You know, you're kind of by yourself, so you're kind of used to the process in terms of like coming up with the ideation of the idea, executing it the way exactly that you kind of want to, editing it the way that you want to, and then, you know, rolling it out in the format. I think I definitely come across more as a director when it's like during the actual production phase, but also the director of photography because I also like operate the cameras. When working with other people that shoot, I didn't have a tendency to kind of delegate, and then based off of kind of like the pre-production, like pre-production preparation, you know, albeit like a mood board or storyboard. That's kind of where I actually lean on the people that I'm delegating these tasks to. So, for example, with the last thing that me and BJ created, we were working with our guy Don, and he was the director of photography for it. Because to me, I trust, you know, his skill set enough to understand like, hey, here's a concept. I want to kind of execute this. He knows how to execute it, and then further add something to it or add a different idea that can then later be used from an editing perspective. So I think a lot of times it just really becomes on what is it that they're best at, because when we're at a shoot, everybody should kind of be enjoying themselves. So what is it that they're best at? And then delegating them to that thing so that they can feel comfortable, feel like they're not working against themselves, and be the most productive for the team. So to me, I can delegate any task. I can hold lights if need be. But for the most part, I think I'm oftentimes the director in that regard.
Nice.
And then the editor.
Yeah. You edit. I mean, I've seen your editing work, man. It's really clean. I complain about editing quite a lot on this platform. I like learning. I like learning new things from it. I find that's where the love comes from and the best benefits of your content. It's, however, the hearing voices over and over again. You're just like, oh, I dread it in the beginning, but once I start get it rolling, I'm like, all right, I can do this. Like, stop complaining.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, like, admittedly, like, it's like it's not something I cared to enjoy at first, but then I realized the effort that it takes to actually edit something well, and the different techniques that you can learn that really push a visual to the point where you kind of really step outside of just being the average editor. And it just takes a little bit of patience. Michelangelo said that the art of perfection is eternal patience. So it's kind of just knowing that, like, you know, you're not going to be good at something the first time you do it. And more or less, it's like probably not the first 100 times, but it takes maybe 150 times just to kind of get it right once. And once you get that, then it's kind of understanding like, yeah, this is just something that's part of that process. And you kind of get that Dunning-Kruger effect. You don't know how good you are until you actually realize how much you don't know. And then you're like, oh, okay, this is a pretty steep hill to climb. But yeah, eventually you get to a point where people will comment on your work in a positive manner. And then you can kind of say, okay, I'm doing something correct, right? Because I still kind of struggle with that too. Sometimes I say, this isn't that impressive, but it isn't until I hear somebody telling me, man, I could never do that. Then it's like, okay, well, it did what it was supposed to do. You know what I mean?
Moving forward, let's talk. Let's get this positive energy into the atmosphere. Me and you, at some point, we're gonna have the time to do the stuff that we like to do all the time. How would you ideally like to split your time between Super Baltimore Bros, Carlwell Group, right, Cam's Cartel? How would you ideally split your time between it? And what are the type of projects that you would be doing? If this was like, yo, this is your day to day, this is the work you're gonna be doing, you don't have to worry about anything else. What would that look like for you?
I would be leaning on really pushing the Carwell Group because, again, I would say like the Super Baltimore Bros and Canvas Cartel are more or less vehicles that I use so that I can kind of showcase the work that the Carwell Group can present and provide to others. So I would certainly be focusing a lot more on the customer acquisition side of it, showing some of those products, if you will, that the Carwell Group is involved in and what they actually are able to produce. And then day to day, I'd be focused on a mixture of locking down clients and working with them on their vision so that if they have that visual need, short form or long form, let's say, for example, a small business comes to me or a medium-sized business comes to me and says, we need to do a visual, a 5-minute about our company and why it's important, then it would be me setting up my week to kind of support that need and understanding like, okay, there's probably 2 days of shooting that's involved, right? And then it's like, this is the type of things that I would need to be kind of covering. So like maybe doing even a site survey and understanding like, hey, what is at this location? Just maybe doing a walkthrough and then saying, okay, I'm going to spend an hour here this day, 5 hours here this day, 4 hours here this day. And then take 2 days to edit everything and then present it to them. So already, if we were talking 8 hours between 2 days and then like 2 days of editing, that's 4 days. That's your week, right? Friday, you do a presentation. And then all in tandem, like I've been saying, you're still having those conversations about, does Canvas Cartel actually need something because it's its own business? So if they don't need anything, then it's almost to the point where as though, well, what's the next business that the Carwell Group can service? All the while, Super Baltimore Bros is constantly working because that's going to be constantly showing the depth of what is possible from the editing techniques. And mind you, not everybody needs the same techniques that the Super Baltimore Bros provide, right? Like I would say that probably is tailored to a very niche audience because it's more visually aesthetic and it's more from the artistic side. So people that like do things within the music space or in the video space might be interested in that. I don't think a business like Under Armour might necessarily care that I can do that. They might need something just clean and they might be impressed with something that I've already done. Maybe they're impressed by something I do professionally, you know? So those are the ways that I kind of segment it based off of what that client is when I'm talking about the Carwell Group. Because I think that's kind of really going to make the determining factor of like, what's that week look like? But if I were just to give a rough estimate, yeah, shooting somewhere, supporting that, editing that, and then providing that, and then keeping that pipeline moving because you need to be kind of moving. If you're not moving, you're gonna, you die. So you got to keep moving.
Yeah, man. That shark mentality, that's how I feel, man. You can't sit still for too long. Um, my mind is going a mile a minute now hearing you talk about this. How do you find the time to get things done with your schedule?
Very limited, man. Like I would say, in between like breaks at work and train rides, and the weekends. That's really the only time I really have time to do things, which makes things hard from we really need to plan this thing and have it released at this date, because then when you look at the calendar, I only have a limited amount of days to actually accomplish something. So it's kind of like, hey, I don't have the luxury of being able to say Monday through Friday. I only can really say Saturday and Sunday. But I think the thing when you're talking about managing things, it's like, okay, but because I know that, the execution has to be this. So the planning needs to be all between then. And that planning is just making the time in between a train ride to jot down the note or put it in a Google Calendar or commit to just writing something down on your notes and then transferring it to a document to make a mood board or whatever it is, Like, I mean, everybody has the same 24 hours and at the same, so to me, it's just like well, I can do a lot of the admin task to get us to that execution point. And it's always more helpful when you're working with a team of people that kind of recognize that admin task, those implied tasks, to work with you. But oftentimes that's not the case. And if money's riding on it, then it's like, well, I'm just going to push it to this point. So the client just sees this 9-pager and we can just get to shooting and just get to it.
So I feel like most entrepreneurs or moonlighters, will tell themselves, if I only had like 3 more hours. Unfortunately, we don't. You only get so much time to do these things. It really is finding the most efficient way to do it until you get into a spot where you just have more to do the stuff that you really want to do.
Well, and I'm like, and I don't want to give the impression that this is like something whereas though you have to have like this, grind culture is like a thing, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's a level of intensity that you have to work with, right? And there's a difference between making the time useful and then just kind of having the time be used for other things. And really what it just boils down to is it's like, I think I read a quote the other day, can't remember who, but it said something to the effect of like, never leave something undone unless you're willing to die having it be unfinished, And when I, from work experience, I kind of always had that mentality, but it took other people to kind of let me know, like, for example, I hate this phrase, but I was out in the sandbox, right? It's an old saying that people say about some war story. And I would just be working crazy hours, like 24 hours almost sometimes. And somebody pulled me aside and said, we're not going to win the war tonight, right? Like there are some things that are more important, even when you're in a life or death situation. So coming from that experience, it just kind of made me realize that like there was so much time that all I did was focus on those things and how efficient I could become. And it still wasn't necessarily helpful. I'm talking about the Afghan war. So for anybody that's watching, for what it's worth, we didn't win, right? And to me, it's just like, okay, so all those hours spent didn't mean that those weren't a waste. It didn't yield in the result. But at the end of the day, like that's kind of what, I kind of rest on when I'm thinking about, okay, well, I had 24 hours. I know I could probably just do this thing real quick. And, by the time I'm like getting into it, then it's like, okay, this is actually cathartic. I kind of needed to get my mind off of work or something like that. So it's not as difficult, but I definitely don't believe in like staying up till like 3:00 in the morning and working the midnight hours, unless you're like on a roll, you know what I'm saying? But otherwise it's like that, I think you need proper rest. Like you need to, I think that's why like you don't hear me saying, oh, I get up at like 5 a.m. or anything like that. So
yeah, I like that quote you just said. I'm not as eloquent, but I like the way I see it is be okay with you have to be okay with what you didn't get done. And the way I see it is I just got rid of all external excuses, unless it's a real external excuse. Like if someone tried to blow up my house, I'm like, bro, I couldn't, you know what I mean? But other than that, I'm like, all right, here's the time I've dedicated to do this thing that I want to work on, interview folks, edit. If I don't get it done in these hours or whatever I do get done in these hours, that's it. I'm not going to carry this laptop around with me when my daughter turns around for a second, type. She goes to try to scramble. No, the work I want to be able to complete, I want to be able to complete it in a manner that's productive, not rushed, period. If I don't do it in the time I've allocated for it, it's all right. It's not life or death. We are going to get it back to it the next day. It keeps me honest and also keeps me focused because I know when it's down, it's down. When it's time to do the other things that I have to do, that's what I'm going to do. And that could be anything from just relaxing, hanging with family, eating, I don't care, any of those things. So no, I feel like this has to be like a 3-parter, which it will be. We should be checking in all the time, man. Like people, I feel like
we can absolutely check in more often. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about focused. Where you're focused, where you're going to be focusing in the next few months for your for the Carlwell group for Super Baltimore Bros. I want to say Super Smash Brothers. So
yeah,
many times.
I've been saying it. I've been messing it up. We definitely didn't want to get copyrighted, so we were just like, let's not do that. So yeah, let's Well, you know, but we're trying. We're trying. So Super Baltimore Bros. It's a mouthful, but yeah. So I mean, to kind of rest back to what I said originally, the focus is always kind of creating. So Baltimore Bros is on a timeline schedule where monthly we're going to be doing some type of release for a visual. That's at least the plan, considering all type of planning and shooting and all that type of stuff. But with those things notwithstanding, like the plan is to always drop something monthly. Intermittently, we want to then kind of take that BTS footage and then drop those things for engagement as well. And then mixing that kind of more with the BMore Human side of the game, we want to then also, and I think something to caveat is a lot of the people that I'm working with in the BMore Human project also work in the Baltimore Bros. You know what I mean? So it's like we kind of all work together on the same things, but it's just different projects. So we're going to have some opportunities coming up, hopefully, to do Be More Human, the interview show, where we're going to do some man on the street. We want to also push the Be More Human from street interviews to more sit downs. So we're trying to create a schedule with entrepreneurs and businesses or artists so that we can kind of do showcases online on YouTube long form. And then kind of create shorter content from those longer form products, and then be able to kind of share that across different social media platforms. So that's kind of like the big thing I think that's taking up the focus. Baltimore Bros and then Be More Human. As those things churn and we meet more business and network, the Carlwell Group is kind of the name that is used in those production efforts. So if anybody is interested in any of that type of production assistance or consulting or actually want work done, then that's kind of how those things. So they kind of all lead together. They're kind of, it's a funnel system, more or less. It's like, if you're interested in this type of stuff, you can watch, enjoy the content, or you can get it produced by us.
Nice. So if you could receive help in any area, or receive assistance in one specific area that you think would help propel you to the next level or help you get these things done, these milestones hit, what area would that be? It could be anything from accounting to whatever, introductions, consulting, investing. There's one thing you're like, yeah, this specific area of opportunity, if we could get this pushing, we'd be good.
Client acquisition and client retention. And client retention, I think, is part and parcel of what you offer the client. So that's going to be more or less on what products and services that we are offering, and do people need them? That's really what it is. But it's oftentimes communicating it to the audience that you're trying to pitch to, depending upon whatever their budget is. And I think from a client acquisition piece, the clients that we've worked with in the past have been, budgetary, like had budgetary constraints. And it was something that, as a business trying to grow, it's difficult when you're working with, smaller entities. So having access to a client pool that needs, legitimate production, with some of those budgetary constraints kind of, not a factor, would be something that I think could really take the Carlwell Group to the next level.
All right, we'll see if we can manifest that for you. Client acquisition. We'll see. Let's go through this network we put together here at the Moonlighters and see what we can put together.
Sure.
Brandon, where can people find you? Shout out everything right now.
Yeah, so you can find me online on IG at Tragic Johnson. That's TRVGCJHNSN. Then also my group, if you actually need some work, it's called the Carlwell Group. You could look at the stuff on Instagram as well, and then go to the Carlwell Group and see that. www.thecarlwellgroup.com. We also have an Instagram page just called the Carlwell Group. And then we're going to have a YouTube coming up soon. You can also check out my brother, BJR. who is BJR Made This on Instagram and on SoundCloud. So the music that he's releasing, you'll be seeing visuals paired up from me or us with the Super Baltimore Bros in the future. Those will be on the IG. I mean, those will be on the YouTube as well. And then Canvas Cartel, if you're looking for clothes, I believe is the Canvas Cartel on Instagram. So yeah, that's I believe it. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. I think I'm B Carlwell head on that one.
Nice, well, Brandon, I appreciate it, man. This was good. This was it was good to talk, man. We
Yeah, man, it was really fun. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you having me on the show, and I'm excited to be a part of this collective.
We got to bring Baltimore to DC. We got to figure out something to do, find a venue, and then figure it out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We definitely want to bring BMore Human down there. So.
Awesome, man. Well, Brandon, man, enjoy the rest of your day. To everyone listening, thank you for listening. We'll be back with more stories, more moonlighting, and we'll see you on the next one.
Take it easy, y'all.